So you now learned about the basic values you can assign to variables, which data structures and types you got available. Now before we dive deeper, let's have a look at some syntactical things which are important to know in JavaScript. Until now we, had kind of straightforward code here. But let's see what we could change about this code and if it would still run or not. So I'll change this back to just being assigned to 5. And of course, if I print this to the console, we see 5. Now notice I have semicolons at the end of the lines. What happens if I delete those semicolons? So I hit clear. What do you think I'll get now if I hit run? Well, I still get 5. So the code works without them as well. JavaScript will determine or will infer where your lines end and will still be able to execute this code fine. So of course this code here would throw an error because it's never ending. But by simply adding a line break here, JavaScript is able to execute this code, or the browser running over your JavaScript and actually executing it is able to run it. Now what happens if I get rid of var keyword here? What do you think we'll see now if I hit run? Well, we still see 5. So even though I don't have the var keyword, JavaScript still seems to have this variable because it automatically creates it and assigns it to the global scope. And I'll come back to global and local, which is the opposite or the other possible scope, soon. But basically for now it's important to understand JavaScript automatically creates this variable and saves it like it did when we had the var keyword. So even though this code does run fine, it's not really the best way to write it. Because, it is very unexpressive and it will also decrease the performance when this code gets executed a bit. Because when the JavaScript engine in the browser runs over this code, it has to do more things than it would have to do if we explicitly tell it where the line ends, explicitly tell it that this is a variable. It will have to figure out these things on its own, and that's one extra step, which of course also costs performance. JavaScript therefore offers us the strict mode, which we can enter to basically tell ourselves when writing the code and the browser when running through it that we have to use strict mode, or in the browser's case that strict mode was used, which makes sure that certain syntactical things have to be considered and won't work if we're doing it other. So to demonstrate this, I'll head over to Plunker again, and I'll again launch a new editor, and in here I'll go to my script.js file, here in preview mode. So I'll go to my script.js file, and I'll just copy this code. And I'm doing this in Plunker because I can't show it in JSBin, unfortunately. So now if I open up my JavaScript console in the developer tools, and I'll clear it for now. If I hit refresh, you see we get 5. So this code still executes. If I now enter strict mode by specifying a string at the top of the file, use strict like this, now you see we get an uncaught reference error. var1 is not defined. So now strict mode enforces us to explicitly tell JavaScript that this is a variable by adding the var keyword. So now it works again. Also, we should use semicolons at the end of each line. It worked without, but that's also part of the strict mode. And depending on the browser, you might need to do this for strict mode to work correctly. So it's important now to be explicit with your code. Tell JavaScript when you create a variable, tell it where the line ends. So while this might look strange to just have a string, not assigned to a variable or anything like this, just some text at the top of the file, this is a very key thing to make sure that you're writing better code or a safer code, more optimized code at least. Be aware that if you're using some third-party library, which might not use strict mode, you could run into problems here. But in reality, most libraries should be written in a clean way using strict mode as well, but you should at least, well, if you get an error, think about this possible error source, that you're using strict mode and your third-party library is not.